The envelope arrived on a quiet Tuesday evening, placed gently beside Clara's teacup, as if it carried fragile news. Ethan stood across from her in the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up, his expression unreadable. "Open it," he said, his voice calm but careful. Clara wiped her hands on a towel and slid her finger beneath the flap. Inside was a plane ticket. Santorini for days. Ocean view suite. Departure in 3 days. For a moment she forgot how to breathe. Ethan was not a man of surprises. He believed in planning, in routine, in knowing exactly where things belonged. But this was bold, romantic, unexpected. She looked up at him, searching for the playful smile that usually followed a surprise. Instead, she saw something softer, something almost distant. "You deserve a break," he said. The words sounded kind, yet heavy, like they carried more meaning than they showed. Clara forced a smile and hugged him, his arms wrapped around her, warm but brief. They pulled away first. That small detail stayed with her longer than it should have. They had been married 11 years. 11 steady years without loud fights or dramatic storms. Their life had been calm, almost too calm. Dinners eaten side by side, evenings spent on separate screens, conversations that covered schedules, bills, family visits. They were not unhappy, but they were not close either. Something quiet had settled between them over time. Like dust on a shelf neither noticed until it was thick. That night, Clara lay awake staring at the ceiling. Santorini, blue roofs and white walls. Romantic sunsets. It was the kind of place couples visited to celebrate love. Why would Ethan send her alone? The question crept into her thoughts and refused to leave. She turned toward him in bed. His back faced her, his breathing slow and steady. She wondered when they had stopped falling asleep facing each other. The next 2 days moved quickly. Clara packed her suitcase with light dresses and sandals she had not worn in years. She stood before the mirror and studied herself. She was still beautiful. She knew that. Not in the loud way she had been at 25, but in a softer way. A mature beauty shaped by time and experience, yet she felt invisible in her own home. Ethan noticed if the laundry was folded, if the car needed fuel, if dinner was late. But did he notice her? At the airport, Ethan carried her bag and walked beside her in silence. The crowd buzzed around them, announcements echoing overhead. Clara waited for him to say something romantic, something dramatic. Something that matched the gesture of sending her away to Greece. Instead, he handed her the boarding pass and said, "Text me when you land." She searched his face again. There was no anger there, no coldness, just a strange calm, as if he had already accepted something she didn't understand. When they hugged goodbye, his hands rested lightly on her back, not tight, not lingering, careful, as if holding too firmly might hurt. The flight felt longer than it was. Clara watched clouds drift past the window and tried to quiet the restless feeling in her chest. She told herself she was overthinking. Maybe this trip was simply what he said it was, a chance for her to relax. She had been tired lately. Work had drained her. Home had felt heavy. Maybe Ethan was trying in his own awkward way to fix that. But deep down, she felt the truth moving beneath the surface like a current she could not see. When the plane landed, Santorini unfolded before her like a dream. The sky was endless blue. Air smelled of salt and sunlight. White buildings climbed the cliffs, glowing against the sea. The beauty was almost overwhelming. Clara felt small standing there, suitcase in hand, wind brushing her hair. It should have been romantic, should have made her heart swell. Instead, it made her aware of how alone she was. The hotel was stunning. Marble floors, wide windows, a balcony that opened to the ocean. She stepped inside her suite and set her bag down slowly. Everything was perfect, too perfect. A chilled bottle of sparkling water waited on the table. Fresh flowers rested near the bed. It felt like a honeymoon room. She walked to the balcony and looked out at the horizon. Couples laughed below, taking photos as the sun dipped lower. Clara imagined Ethan standing beside her, his arm around her waist. The image felt distant, like a memory from another life. She unpacked quickly and changed into a light blue dress. The restaurant downstairs overlooked the water, candles flickering. As evening fell, Clara ordered dinner and tried to enjoy the view. She told herself she would relax. She would breathe. She would stop searching for hidden meanings. Then she heard her name, Clara. She turned sharply. Daniel stood a few steps away, surprise written across his face. Daniel was one of Ethan's old friends from college, tall, confident, with a warm smile that used to fill rooms. She had not seen him in years. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" she asked. He laughed lightly. "I'm here for the architecture conference." "I didn't know you were coming too." The word conference struck her like a sudden wave. "Conference," she repeated, double quotes, "yes." Ethan didn't mention it. Daniel looked confused. He said, "You might join for a few days." Clara felt the ground shift beneath her calm expression. Ethan had never mentioned a conference. He had framed the trip as a gift, a break, not something connected to work or colleagues. She forced a small smile. "No, he didn't tell me." Daniel hesitated, sensing tension. "Well, it's good too. See you? How have you been?" She answered politely, but her mind raced. Why would Ethan leave out something so simple? It wasn't a secret. Conferences were normal, so why hide it? Dinner passed in a blur. Daniel returned to his table and Clara stared at the sea, her appetite gone. The sunset painted the sky in soft pink and gold, but she barely noticed. Her phone rested beside her plate. No new messages from Ethan. Back in her room, she dialed his number. He answered after 2 rings. "How's Greece?" he asked. "It's beautiful," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I saw Daniel tonight." There was a pause, short, controlled. "Oh, right. He mentioned he'd be there. You didn't tell me that?" "I didn't think it mattered." It mattered. She felt it deeply. Not because Daniel was there, but because Ethan had chosen silence. "Why didn't you say anything?" she pressed gently. "I just wanted you to enjoy the trip," he answered. "No complications." Complications. The word felt strange. Seeing a familiar face was not complicated, less something else was. They ended the call politely, too politely. Clara placed the phone on the nightstand and sat at the edge of the bed. The room felt bigger now. Emptier. She replayed the last few months. In her mind, the quiet dinners, the short conversations, the way Ethan sometimes stared at nothing as if lost in thought. Had he been planning this? Had he been thinking about space? About distance? Clara stood and walked back to the balcony. The moon hung low above the sea. Music drifted up from the restaurant below. She wrapped her arms around herself and let the wind brush against her skin. She realized something painful in that moment. She could not remember the last time Ethan had looked at her the way he used to. With admiration, with warmth, with hunger. Had she changed? Had he? Or had they simply grown used to each other until excitement faded into routine? The thought frightened her. Not because of anger, but because of uncertainty. Calm marriages could quietly dissolve without anyone noticing. Her phone buzzed suddenly. A message from Ethan. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be beautiful," she read. It twice. It sounded kind, thoughtful, but distant. It's like a message sent to a friend. Clara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling once more. The beauty of Santorini pressed in around her, yet she felt unsettled. The trip had begun with surprise. Now it carried questions. Why here? Why alone? Why now? As sleep slowly approached, one truth became clear in her heart. This trip was not just a vacation. It was a turning point. She could feel it in the silence between texts, in the careful hug at the airport. In the conference, he forgot to mention something in her marriage had shifted, and she had a feeling that by the time she returned home, nothing would feel the same again. Clara woke early the next morning, the soft light of Santorini spilling across the white walls of her suite. She could hear the waves crashing gently below, a rhythm that should have been calming, but instead made her restless. The questions from the night before still circled in her mind. Why hadn't Ethan mentioned Daniel would be here? Why had he framed this trip as a simple gift, when the reality was entangled with schedules and conferences? She shook her head. Perhaps she was overthinking. Perhaps Ethan's intentions were as simple as he claimed. But the unease in her chest refused to settle. After a quick shower, Clara stepped onto the balcony and inhaled the salty morning air. The town was waking slowly. Cafes opened, shopkeepers arranged their wares, and tourists strolled down the narrow cobblestone streets. She felt small, a single figure in a town built for couples and celebrations. Her gaze swept to the horizon, and for a fleeting moment, she imagined Ethan beside her, his hand brushing hers. The thought made her stomach twist with longing and a sudden ache she couldn't name. The trip, meant to offer distance, had done the opposite, had made her painfully aware of how much she missed him. And, perhaps, how much she had taken. Their connection for granted, Clara decided to leave the hotel and explore the town before the conference events began. She wandered through narrow streets lined with vibrant flowers spilling from terracotta pots, the sun warming her shoulders. It was beautiful. It was everything postcards promised. Yet beauty alone could not soothe the restless stirrings in her heart. The cobblestones beneath her feet seemed too deliberate, too fixed. Like the life she had fallen into with Ethan, beautiful, but predictable, unchanging. She wanted unpredictability. She wanted emotion. She wanted the thrill of connection that had slowly faded from her marriage. She stopped at a cafe overlooking the ocean and ordered coffee, letting the aroma and warmth ground her. That's when Daniel appeared again. He approached with a casual smile, the kind of smile that made her feel remembered, seen. "Clara, fancy seeing you here again," he said, pulling out a chair without waiting for an invitation. She hesitated, caught between politeness and discomfort. "I guess Santorini is a small world," she replied lightly. Daniel laughed softly, and the sound seemed to echo a memory she had long buried: late-night talks in college, shared laughter, unspoken understanding. It wasn't romantic in the usual sense, but it was intimate in a way she hadn't realized she craved. Daniel asked about her flight, her hotel, her time in the town. He listened with genuine interest, remembering details she had mentioned in passing: her favorite coffee, her love for the sea, her habit of photographing small moments. These were details Ethan used to know too, but Clara realized Ethan hadn't. Hadn't noticed lately. The contrast stung. She felt a mixture of guilt and longing. Guilt for noticing someone else's attentiveness. Longing for the attentiveness that had once been hers to claim in her own marriage. Over the next hour, their conversation flowed easily. Daniel shared stories about the conference architecture projects that fascinated him, anecdotes about his work. Clara laughed genuinely, something she hadn't done in days. And yet, beneath the laughter, there was a constant tug in her chest. A reminder that Daniel was not the one she was married to, and that this connection, while comforting, was only temporary. The bitter sweetness of it made her ache in ways she couldn't yet articulate. Later, walking along the cliffs that overlooked the sea, Clara thought about Ethan. The more she compared him to Daniel, the more she realized how much their relationship had dulled over time. Ethan wasn't inattentive on purpose. He was caught in routine, absorbed by responsibilities, and perhaps afraid to confront the quiet distance that had crept between them. That distance had become a wall neither of them acknowledged, but both felt. Daniel, by contrast, reminded her of what it felt like to be truly noticed, to feel seen without effort. It was not a betrayal, but a mirror. She tried calling Ethan that afternoon, but the call went unanswered. Her stomach knotted with frustration and fear. Was he avoiding her, or simply busy? When he finally answered, his voice sounded tired, careful. "How's the trip?" he asked. "It's fine," Clara said, keeping her tone even. She wanted honesty, confrontation, clarity, yet it felt impossible to demand it over the phone. "Daniel mentioned he'd be here," she asked cautiously. Ethan sighed. "I thought it would be better if you just enjoyed yourself. No need to worry about details." Clara felt the sting of omission. It wasn't malicious, but it carried weight. The omission was symbolic of everything unspoken between them, the small things forgotten, the growing gaps, the silence that stretched longer than the words ever did. By evening, Clara was restless again. She took a long walk along the cliffs, toward the lighthouse, the cool breeze tugging at her hair. The horizon was painted in shades of orange and pink, the kind of sunset that made people hold hands or kiss, the kind of sunset meant for couples in love. She was alone, not physically alone, but emotionally isolated. She thought about the past years, about the small compromises, the quiet routines. It's the way love can be measured in bills paid and chores done rather than in warmth and attention. She had given Ethan the benefit of the doubt, allowed the silence to fill the spaces that should have been alive with conversation and connection. She recalled the first time they met, the excitement, the nervous laughter, the way he looked at her like she was extraordinary. She remembered late-night drives, holding hands in the dark, and conversations that lasted until dawn. Those moments were memories now, fading echoes. The present felt heavy, complicated, and yet ripe with possibility. The trip had forced her to confront what she had long avoided: her feelings, their distance, and the choices they both had made that led them here. Daniel had reached out again that evening to check. She wanted to join a small gathering with other conference attendees. Clara paused, feeling the pull of companionship and the lure of distraction. She imagined walking alongside him, laughing, feeling the ease of connection she craved. But then she remembered Ethan, waiting at home, uncertain, hesitant, trying in his own imperfect way. She realized the trip was more than an escape. It was a test, though unspoken. A reflection, a challenge to confront the truth they both had been avoiding for years. Instead of going to the gathering, Clara stayed on her balcony. She watched the lanterns light up the town below, the sound of soft music drifting from distant cafes. She thought about love, how it changes, how it quiets, how it grows complicated when it is taken for granted. She realized she still loved Ethan, not in the fiery, reckless way she had in youth, but in the steady, enduring way that withstands time. And yet love alone was not enough. Tension, presence, and effort were required too. Her mind wandered to the silent moments they shared at home, the times they had drifted into separate worlds. She thought about conversations they had postponed, feelings they had hidden, and the slow accumulation of distance. The trip had given her clarity. She saw that love was not absent in her marriage, was simply overshadowed by routine, unspoken words, and unacknowledged needs. Daniel's presence highlighted what was missing, not in a threatening way, but as a reminder of what attention and awareness could feel like. The next morning, Clara walked along the beach at dawn, her feet sinking into the cool sand. She felt the emptiness of the trip not as loneliness, but as a canvas. She could fill it with reflection, with understanding, with plans to confront the quiet distance that had crept into her marriage. She realized that space had a strange power. It amplified longing, yes, but it also created perspective. She had been seeing her marriage from the inside for too long, focusing on comfort and habit. Now, from a distance, she could see it as it was: full of love, full of flaws, full of opportunities for renewal. Clara returned to her room and opened her journal. She wrote without restraint, pouring out thoughts she had held back for months. Words spilled across the page: questions, fears, memories, desires. Each word lightened her heart, untangled the knots of confusion, and clarified her emotions. She realized she had the courage to face Ethan when she returned, to speak honestly about the ways they had drifted, the ways they had failed to notice each other, and the ways they could rebuild. She no longer wanted to run from the distance. She wanted to bridge it. The rest of the day passed in quiet observation. Clara wandered through the town, admired the architecture, and watched the sun glint off the sea. She noticed couples holding hands, families laughing, strangers smiling. Each interaction was a reminder of the life she shared with Ethan and the potential that remained. The trip had shown her not just the beauty of the world, but the fragility and strength of human connection. It was a lesson wrapped in a gift of scenery, air, and light. That evening, Clara and Daniel met briefly for coffee. The conversation was light, cordial, professional. Daniel's attentiveness was comforting, but Clara now understood that it was a reflection of what she wanted to see in her marriage, not a replacement. The moment clarified her feelings. She didn't need someone new to fill the gaps, okay? She needed to confront the gaps she had with Ethan, the man she loved, the man she had promised to share life with, and the man she had allowed routine to separate from her heart. Clara woke on the final morning of her trip with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. The sun poured through the window, painting her room in gold, and the sound of waves rolling against the shore filled the air. For days had passed in a blur of sunrises, walks, and reflection. She had wandered the cliffs, sipped coffee in quiet cafes, and watched the town come alive around her. She had spoken with Daniel a few times, exchanged polite conversation, and allowed herself to feel the gentle comfort of being noticed, but also the pang of longing for Ethan. Now, as she packed her belongings, she knew that what awaited her at home would be far more challenging than the beauty of Santorini. She had clarity, and clarity demanded confrontation. The morning felt heavier than the previous ones. Clara zipped up her suitcase slowly, each click of the zipper echoing in her quiet, sweet. She thought about Ethan, the careful hug at the airport, the missed details, the silences at home, the distance that had grown without either of them acknowledging it. It was not betrayal. It was something subtler, something that crept into daily life unnoticed, neglect in small gestures, missed attentiveness, quiet walls built by routine. She had realized over the past days that love did not vanish. It merely needed to be acknowledged, nourished, and confronted when it faltered. Santorini had given her that understanding, and she could not ignore it any longer. After checking out, Clara stepped onto the balcony one last time. The town was waking, golden light spilling across whitewashed walls. Fishermen preparing boats, cafe owners sweeping the steps outside their doors. She felt the life around her as vividly as she felt the life inside her own chest, the mixture of nervousness, excitement, and fear that came with facing the truth she had been avoiding. Daniel had left for the conference hall, offering a brief smile as he went, and Clara was finally alone with her thoughts. She realized that the brief warmth she had felt talking to him was not a call to distraction, but a lens through which she could view her own life with Ethan. Daniel had shown her what attention could feel like, but now she understood it was time to turn that understanding homeward. The flight back was quiet. Clara watched the sea from the window, clouds drifting lazily, sunlight sparkling on the waves below. She thought of Ethan with an ache in her chest, not the distant man who had left her here, but the man she had loved, the one who had made her laugh at midnight, who had held her hand with devotion, who had been her partner through years of routine and ordinary miracles. She realized the distance between them was not irreparable. It was a symptom of forgetting, of taking comfort for granted, of failing to nurture what was most important. The trip had been a catalyst, a mirror reflecting the dormant love that still existed. She was determined not to waste it when she arrived. Home, the house felt familiar, yet different. The quiet that had once seemed comforting now felt loaded with anticipation. Ethan was in the kitchen, moving slowly, as though he, too, had been reflecting on the past days. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment neither spoke. The sight of him, the man she had married, flawed and imperfect, yet deeply hers, filled her with a rush of emotions, longing, relief, tenderness, and a quiet determination. Clara set her suitcase down and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of unspoken words and the urgency of honesty pressing in from every direction. Ethan finally spoke. "You're back," he said softly, as though saying more would require courage he was not sure he had. Clara nodded, trying to steady the mix of fear and anticipation that made her chest tighten. "Yes," she replied. "I'm back. We need to talk." Ethan's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of apprehension passing across his face. He gestured for her to sit at the kitchen table, and she did, careful to keep her composure. The room was quiet except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. It was a small, ordinary room, but the air felt charged, as though the years of silence and distance between them had been compressed into this one moment. Clara began slowly. "Ethan, I've been thinking about us, about the way things have changed." Her voice was gentle but firm, a mix of vulnerability and resolve. Ethan listened, his hands folded on the table, eyes intent. Clara spoke of the distance, the silence, the way routine had replaced attention, the way small gestures had been neglected, and the quiet ache she had carried for months. She did not accuse, she did not demand. She simply spoke honestly, revealing her emotions, fears, and desires. She spoke of love that had not vanished, only been overlooked. And as she spoke, Ethan's eyes softened, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. Ethan's response was slow but sincere. He spoke of his own fears, his own neglect, and his own sense of failure. He admitted that he had noticed the distance, but did not know how to bridge it. He had sent Clara away, not out of avoidance, but out of hope, hope that distance would spark clarity, hope that she would see their love for what it was, and hope that they could face the truth together. He had not expected the mix of emotions it would stir, nor the realization of just how much both of them had allowed routine to overshadow connection. His words were honest, tender, and full of the kind of vulnerability that had been absent for far too long. Clara listened, feeling the walls between them begin to crumble. She realized that the trip had not been a punishment, a test, or a warning. It had been a gift, a chance to reflect, to breathe, and to see the cracks clearly. She reached across the table, and for the first time in months, Ethan took her hand. In his, the gesture was simple, yet powerful. It was not dramatic, it was not cinematic. It was real. And in that moment, they both felt a flicker of hope, the possibility of rekindling what had been quieted but never extinguished. Over the next several hours, he talked continuously. It's not about bills, chores, or schedules, but about feelings, about loneliness, fear, longing, and desire, about the ways they had failed to notice each other and the ways they still could. Clara admitted the clarity she had gained during her time away. Ethan confessed the relief and fear he had felt in sending her. They spoke of memories, of first impressions, of laughter and intimacy they had shared over the years. It was an emotional, almost cathartic experience, the kind that left their hearts heavy but light at the same time. They were no longer roommates. They were partners in the truest sense, facing their own flaws and the realities of long-term love with courage and honesty. The days that followed were filled with small but meaningful gestures. Ethan remembered details he had once forgotten: the way Clara liked her coffee, the soft music she enjoyed, the stories she told without realizing they revealed her deepest thoughts. Clara noticed his attentiveness, the renewed effort in his eyes, the careful listening that replaced distracted nods. They went for walks, hand in hand, talking about life, dreams, and the little moments that make a marriage strong. The trip had sparked reflection, but the real work they both understood began at home: everyday attention, shared laughter, and honest communication. Clara also realized something profound. Love is not only about grand gestures or passionate declarations. 'Tis about noticing, caring, and choosing each other consistently, even when life is mundane. Ethan had loved her all along, but he had been lost in routine just as she had. The trip had given them perspective. The opportunity to see not only what was missing, but what remained enduring love, shared history, and the willingness to try again. They had been given a second chance, and neither intended to waste it. By the end of the week, Clara felt a sense of peace she had not known in months. The weight of unanswered questions, of silence, of unspoken longing had lifted. She and Ethan had confronted the distance that had grown between them and had chosen to meet it with honesty and love. They had discovered the importance of communication, attentiveness, and vulnerability. And perhaps most importantly, they had rediscovered each other, not the young lovers they once were, but the seasoned partners who had endured challenges and were willing to fight for connection. Their love was not perfect, but it was real, and real was enough. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, the soft light of sunset filtering through the windows, Clara rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. The world outside moved on, indifferent, but inside their home, something profound had shifted. They had faced the truth of their marriage, acknowledged the gaps, and chosen to rebuild with intention. The comfort of routine was no longer a trap. It was a framework within which they could nurture love with care and presence. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest, a combination of relief, gratitude, and quiet joy. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she also knew that facing them together was possible, even beautiful. The next few months became a journey of rediscovery. Clara and Ethan took small trips, not grand gestures, but walks in the park, late-night conversations, and simple dinners where attention was undivided. They laughed more freely, spoke more openly, and allowed themselves to be vulnerable with one another. The trip to Santorini remained a touchstone, a reminder that distance can reveal truths, that reflection can heal hidden wounds, and that love requires both courage and daily effort. Every day, they chose to notice, to care, and to reconnect. It was a slow process, but it was meaningful, genuine, and there's